Okay, this is long overdue. I've been planning to do this for a couple of years. What am I doing? We are going to do a review of orthotics. Custom orthotics, ones that are bought from particular brands, the sales practices, and the actual utility of the devices. So to get things started, the most expensive and most well-known supplier I know of orthotics that are actually not custom. They're prefabricated, but they're meant to maintain and adjust certain types of support for your arch. Is the Good Feet store. I'll get into the story of how I ended up being a customer of theirs and how I feel about it, but we'll get there. The first thing I want to show you is what they sold me. If I'd had more knowledge of their sales practices, I would have left the store with exactly what I needed instead of the package that they sold me. I went into the store in a situation where it was very painful to walk, and I was a week away from having an appointment with my orthopedist to try and alleviate this problem. It was impacting my ability to do my work and just mobility. And since this place was in the area, when I was out and about, I just went there to see what they were talking about, and we will go over the entire process. But here's the sticker shock. They used to have commercials on TV talking about their products and the utility of them and how they saved and changed people's lives. And if you go online, you'll find some early videos and reviews of storefronts when they open in different locations with local news and things like that. And there's not a lot of official information that you can find online, but the long and short of it is what you'll typically see is a person being fitted for one particular orthotic. That single orthotic for that pair of shoes that they're wearing in said video, it seems real practical. It's like, oh yeah, it fits that person's foot. They take measurements and everything. In reality, what they're selling now in this day and age is, as you can see, a three-step system. This three-step system consists of three orthotics. Each one, as you can see by the labels, having a specific function it's supposed to perform. The first part is supposed to strengthen your arch. The second one is supposed to maintain the placement of your arch after it's been strengthened. And then the third is so your foot can relax in that position. The degree of differences in these, if you can't tell by the picture, is the rigidity and the angles of the different arch supports. That first pair that's pictured is not what I went home with because it was too extreme and totally uncomfortable and made me feel unbalanced when I walked. So I had to at least voice my discomfort with that particular iteration of their arch supports so that we could get something that worked a little better. What ended up happening is the second variation, the black, more rigid, ended up replacing the initial strengthener. The relaxer that's pictured there, which is a translucent polymer, ended up becoming my maintainers. I have a clear pair that were meant to be my maintainers that became my utility pair, let's put it that way. And that would constitute three, but then there was a device that was sold to me as a relaxer, which is these leather-topped ones that I can't really use for multiple reasons, and I'll explain it. And they were given to me in a fourth box. They said, and we're going to put these in here. You'll need these. That's what they told me. Where did that information come from? Came from this handout here. So this handout is branded with the logo for the Good Feet store, and it mentions the three different types of supports that you can get, as does the box in which the system comes in. This is corporate branding to the T, very nice, well put together. But in the store, they went on to prescribe this particular routine regimen, which they didn't clearly state to me as just being a suggestion. We'll get into that. And that's how you get the most out of your inserts. Now, in reality, I'd already seen a podiatrist who, as we'll get to in the review of their inserts, gave me some devices that worked, but I had limited use of them because they don't fit these inserts to your shoes. They fit them to your feet, but your feet are malleable. You have bones and tendons, and you have fat and flesh. The soft tissues of your body conform to things when you put them in them. These insoles don't. They're hard. So if it's slightly wider than the base of your shoe's going to stretch to conform to the insert, which can either deform or potentially damage your shoes. And in some cases, your shoes can't accommodate these at all. And that's what happened with the other ones. But let me go on. So with no options, they provided something. We tested it in the shoes I was wearing at the time, and I was like, all right, this helps. This is going to make life livable. So where do I sign scenario took place? And that's when the sticker shock thing kicked in, and you find out that you're going to get 4 inserts for $2,000. And all these things that say, well, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you this. And it gives you the impression that they're throwing that stuff in. But then when you get the itemized statement, it's like, no, we're going to charge you for all these other different things that you don't necessarily need. I didn't need no-show socks. I didn't need Velcro tabs to adhere to these inserts because my body weight was enough to hold them. I didn't really need a protection plan. We're going to find out about that later. And they also provide their own insoles that have a little grip to the bottom of them. But the whole point of the insoles was they took the insoles of my shoes I was wearing so that they could figure out the correct size of these to fit in my shoes. And then they tried to not give them back because they intended on selling me the insoles that they sell, which, if you look here, I'll point it out to you. They call them overlay cushions. So do the math, $160 for 3. So that's not an even division, but it's a little over $53 a piece for a very uncomplicated, thick foam cushion that you're supposed to trim the size. So it's your standard insert that you can buy that's supposed to be high density and providing shock absorption. So they got me for that, but I made them at least give me my actual insoles back. And the actual review of the product, let's get to that. So their prescription for how often you do whatever, it ended up being null and void. What worked for me was which of these insoles fit into the particular shoe and did the best with the last of the shoe. And the last of the shoe is the shape of the sole and the bottom of the shoe and the body of the shoe, how your foot fits in it. Some shoes naturally have a last that has arch built in. If you have a shoe with a high heel, then the last of the shoe is going to cause your foot to actually lean forward. So if you notice, the way they're designed is to provide arch and then some support in other areas, like the metatarsal of your foot. There'll be a little bit of a lift there. But then for the heel, it's flat, and it's just meant for your heel to rest there and hold it in place. Your weight holds this insert in, and your foot rests over it. And for me, I found that the best result was to actually just use the insole that was already in the shoe and put it over this insert instead of using theirs, because of the thickness of the inserts that they provided. It forced your foot forward, and you actually, if your shoes fit just barely, it would give you an 1/8 or 1/9 of an inch more forward in the shoe, so that you would be rubbing your toes against the top of your shoe potentially, and it'd be very uncomfortable. So that's the thing I had to do. One of the things that came of this was I ended up going up 2 shoe sizes to accommodate all the inserts that I had to get the most results to deal with my plantar fascitis. But, so an example of one of these inserts here is, it's plastic, but it's flexible, it's pliable. So your body weight, your body heat is going to make these conform to some degree. Their mold is predetermined. This was not made specifically for my foot entirely. There's some adjustment they can make in the store by warming it and bending it. They took a ink impression of my foot, but they can't do anything to deal with the pronation of my heels when I walk. That's not built into these. This is pretty much an arch support, and that's about it. So, as you can see, this is a thicker translucent plastic that isn't as soft, so it's got more support. And this one was probably the biggest one they could find, so it's wider. And I, the person who's making this video, I'm 6'8", and I'm currently wearing size 16 and 17 and 18 shoes, primarily 17 and 18 with these inserts. I've had a lot of foot issues in my life. So that extra fourth pair that they added to the mix were these, which I think their intent was these are supposed to go into dress shoes, but it's the hardest possible plastic. It's got a leather topper on it, and they're extra thick. The hardest thing on these shoes, not on these shoes, these insoles, is the actual font that they've molded into there. So it's got a rigid edge, and what happens is it actually, that's not a good angle, but it digs into the bottom of your shoe. So it actually tears up your shoe. So if you have a leather footbed or a fabric one or a fiberboard one, whatever it is, this starts to just grind against it because it has the whole of your body weight on it, pressing down as you move, and as you move, it just grinds in there, and it ended up tearing up the footbed of some shoes I have. So these are just relatively unusable for that purpose. And because of the type of plastic it is, it's so rigid and it doesn't have anything to keep it from moving. The little Velcro stickies they give you are useless because they just slide off of this plastic and they slide in your shoes. So it's very uncomfortable and it's not very productive towards getting the end result. Because the one perk that these have over the others is these, if you just put your foot on top of this, it's a hard piece of plastic. It's very uncomfortable. You need to have an insole over it. For these, you can wear these without having an additional insole because there's built-in cushion in this leather. But it's on top of this very rigid and inflexible plastic that nothing sticks to, so it slides in your shoe. And that defeats the purpose of having a stabilizing insert. So we'll see if the extended warranty I paid $100 for will allow me to exceed the 90-day policy for returns and swap those out for something I can use, because it's been a while since I purchased these. In reality, I'm going to get into the comparison once I tell you about these other ones I have, but it wasn't all bad. The sales experience, the pressure tactics they used that were not very obvious, but given the condition most people come into a store like that, they're also very callous. You know, people who are struggling to walk, they're in constant pain, and they just want relief. And instead of just giving them something they need in a quantity that makes sense, you upsell them and you use the option of applying for store credit and getting instant approval so that you can charge as much as possible for, as many people would notice, pieces of plastic that you could 3D print very easy if you had any skill with AutoCAD. These are all patented, by the way, so that's why you probably don't see anything like this out in the wild, and it's some variations that aren't as useful. It's because they patent all theirs. So their store is basically like a shoe store, but they primarily have like thousands of these different inserts of different sizes and of different qualities, so that when you come in, you don't get a custom made, but customizable to the degree that it's modular set of inserts for you to use. So over here, we're going to look at the fine print. And this is when I finally was at the point where, yeah, I can use these. What's it going to cost me? Did I dox myself? I don't think I did. but I probably came close. We'll see. Anyway, all sales are final. 90 days to exchange, and it's only for the inserts, basically. So you can get an extended service plan for $100. Exchanges aren't new stuff. It's stuff that other people returned. It's a storefront, so there was nothing to be shipped in my case. I guess at some point they sold the stuff online. And big one here. Good Feet products are not intended as medical devices. Good Feet employees do not diagnose, prescribe, or treat medical conditions. Please, for serious foot-related problems, consult your physician. So this prescription of how to use these devices is not medical. They have no reason to sell you this set as some kind of therapeutic device because they're not medical experts. They can't diagnose what problems you have, so how can they tell you that you need 3, let alone 4 sets at, let's do the price in there, $450, $410, $410, and $450. So $1,600, $1,700 worth of inserts that are based on something that's not clinical. It's just salesmanship. So yeah, so this piece here, which noticeably doesn't have the actual official branding of the company and has the one proviso that says these are only suggested wearing instructions. If I'd have been in less distress, I might have thought, since had I seen this before the final purchase point, I would have been smart to say, can I just get ones I can use while I'm working and just get the one set, and how much is that going to cost? Because based on their own literature, I should be able to make a purchase like that. Most of what you see online when they're doing press to publicize their stores and their products is the same way. They're not telling people to buy a set. They have someone come in and they get one particular set for them to use. That's what I would have done had I known better. I didn't know better. I didn't need all the extra stuff at highly marked up prices sold to me. But the sales experience, not the greatest. But the utility of the product, we're going to get into that after we cover the competition. So the competition, we're going to go in reverse order. We're going to go to the ones that I got from Podiatrist numero dos. I saw 2 podiatrists before I ended up going to the Good Feet store. So what you see here is a pair of actual custom insoles that were made at the New Balance store. The New Balance store actually does a compression mold of your foot that they then send out to a lab along with instructions based on the prescription from your podiatrist to add certain features. And the person who handled this process at the New Balance store in Creve Coeur, Missouri, also made some decisions about what he thought would suit me best based on my own stature and the different foot problems I had from his experience doing this. So we have a metatarsal ball to support the metatarsal of my foot. And as you can see, the forefoot of this actual insert is just basically an insole. It's a memory foam insole with a leather backing on the bottom. And then the midfoot and the rear of the foot, the heel, are just plastic molding like those, but it's more substantial, which has its own problems. And there's actually some customization with the heel. So this has a cup to hold your heel, but it also has a lift, which allows them to make adjustments for any pronation issues you have. So I pronate to one side, and I wear out the outer heel of my shoes as a result. So as you can see, if you look here, it's thick on this side, and there's a little bit of a trim there, like they beveled it in there. But on the instep, it's hard to see with this camera, but there's a significant amount of trimming they did to compensate so that my foot would roll inward instead of outward so that I would not overpronate to the outside of my heel. I'm slew-footed, that's what causes it. So they were able to do that level of customization. So my experience was the initial pair had a different topping on them, and they had a weird smell. And they thought it was potentially the adhesive. So I had to take them back, and they removed the original topping and adhesive and added this new topping here, inclusive of the leather bottom. And the smell was gone, thankfully. As far as wearing these, because of the thickness of this heel cup, these don't fit very well in shoes because there is absolutely no flex at all. These are super rigid. And so if there's any, I don't want to say customization, but if there's any particular nuance to the shoes you're wearing where they have a built-in arch, they're not completely flat, then it distorts how these are meant to fit. So you've already got this huge arch and this thick sole, and this is going inside of your shoe. So if you don't have a shoe that sits very high, like for instance, I thought I was going to wear these with trainers. Well, trainers, they're low-cut shoes. This lifts you almost an inch out of the shoe. So if there's any support you're going to get on your forefoot and around your ankle from lacing them up, your foot's sitting out of the shoe. So it ends up creating a situation where you feel like you're coming out of the shoe while you're in the shoe. One of the other problems that I picked up on was in shoes where they're wide enough and they have a big enough toe box and enough clearance in the upper, what you'll see is these particular inserts, they have this other tendency that I would have never even considered a problem, and that's when you put your foot in, they start to slide forward in this weird way because they're very slick at the bottom. There's nothing that really provides any tackiness at all. So with these, because of the nature of the polymer they use and some of the imprinting, they do catch a little better. But you can also use the insert that they sold with me that has a tackiness to it to hold them in place. Or your original insoles, because they have a tackiness usually on the bottom of them. Some of them have a light adhesive. Some of them, they use a compression foam that has a tackiness that then sticks to this and keeps them in place. But these, the insole is part of it. You don't use an additional insole. You have to just put them in as is. So I found I would struggle to get my foot in some cases, because if it was a shoe where these fit very tightly, getting over this metatarsal ball was a problem if the shoes didn't have a lot of clearance in the upper and the forefoot and the toe box, where I would hit this and I would be struggling to get my foot in, and this whole insole would slide in the shoe. And even if the shoe was not longer than this, where there wasn't room, it would cause this to fold over and push forward, and the whole insert would just slide, and then I would have to pull my foot out. My foot would get caught on the metatarsal ball and just pull them back, so I couldn't get my foot in there good and get a good fit. So in certain shoes, these were workable, but for most of the shoes I wear, they weren't. So I have limited use of these, and these were definitively ones that forced me to buy 2 sizes larger just to get these into some shoes, to see if I could get the utmost use of them and if they were going to be more helpful than others. Good thing is they only sold me 1 pair, and there was a discount, so these were between $275 and $350, I think, for these, compared to the minimum of $410 for what constitutes just a piece of plastic for these that I had to buy in a set. So these will last you. They're very substantial. And if you got the right shoes, they get the job done. But you're going to have the right shoes that have a lot of room and clearance. And they don't have a very pronounced arch already built into them or anything like that. You probably need ones that have a pretty flat footbed in there. So these are the New Balance insoles. So they're like a power tool almost, where for special circumstances with the appropriate footwear, it's a substantial support tool that I can put to use. That gives me all the bells and whistles that you're supposed to get from an insert, but just they don't work with every shoe. Last, the first ones I got, these were actually covered by insurance. Insurance does not cover good feet store equipment, and it does not cover New Balance. But if you go to your podiatrist, and BK Podiatry was the doctor's practice I went to, they came out with a tablet and took pictures of my feet from like 5 or 6 angles, and then they sent these off to a lab, and then a few weeks later the lab sent these inserts. So the way these are constructed is it functions as part insole, just like the New Balance ones where you got the forefoot, and then you got the support component, which is this rigid polymer. It's almost like concrete. There's little to no give. That is constructed based on the imaging they took of your foot. It's not as extreme when you eyeball it as some of the other ones, but as you can see, there's the core. This outer layer is felted, and it used to wrap around, and we'll get into that. And then you've got a cushion top layer that's memory foam. So these were great when I got them, but the only downside was when they measure your foot, and this applies to all of these. I already said this before, your foot conforms to footwear because just like my hand, if I put my hand down, it's movable. We're 70% water. I'm not in frame. But like when you press against something, your body moves until you get to the bone. So your foot is relaxed when they take the images and when they do the compression. It's done barefoot. So your foot is as wide and as thick as it could possibly be because it's resting and it's gravity. So the insoles that they make are also wider than any shoes you would wear. So when I would put these in the boots that I wore them with, they tore up the inside of the boot. The heel counter in particular in these leather boots I wore, Thorogood boots, were the brand, it tore the leather up. So I stopped wearing them because I'm like, well, if I don't have shoes, what good are inserts? I found out from a coworker who went to the same podiatrist that they can trim them, and that's why you see the filling exposed like that, because they literally just ground off a substantial amount where the felted outer layer was wrapped around to make them narrower so they would fit in my shoes. Once we did that, it fit in more shoes, but these are still not anywhere near as narrow as my typical insole in my training shoes. When I say training, I mean like runners. So compare it to this, which would be the narrowest of the inserts. That is the good foot store. The heel literally sits within that. And this good foot insert, that's functional for me because it will fit in my shoes, and then I just put their insole in them. But for the shoes these fit in, it was immediate relief. And since insurance covered them, I didn't eat a substantial cost either. But it would be a case of literally having to consult with your doctor and pleading with them to please adjust the width of the insole so that it fits your footwear and not just the pictures of your foot that you took, and for them to make adjustments based on that. And if they can do that, you're not going to have a problem, and this is going to be the way to go every time. For cost and for functionality, these are great. The only other downside is, since it's literally a stiff board with no flex whatsoever for the most part, there's going to be certain footwear where this is just going to work as a, what do you call that, a cantilever, where it's going to rock in the shoe, because if the shoe isn't flat, then these are not going to conform to it, whereas you're going to get some of that with the Good Feet store. So in the perfect situation, you're able to get these. These are fitted perfectly for your shoes, and you can wear these. And You don't have a substantial cost to incur, and you get to get the relief from the issues you're having with plantar fasciitis and other foot issues. This is mainly an arch support. There's not much it does to help relieve pronation. If you have serious issues with pronation, again, and you can get these size to fit your footwear appropriately, for the clinical relief of foot issues, this is probably going to be the best way to go, unless you have a podiatrist who does a more advanced version of the prescription custom insoles that can accommodate for some of these more radical features that they had to do, like beveling in one side to compensate for you overpronating to the lateral heel, which is the problem I had. So minimal utility for these. Well made. Only had to buy one pair. There were no shady sales practices, but it's an industrial tool that doesn't really fit for casual purposes in every piece of footwear that you have. Yeah, I literally had to buy shoes to fit the inserts. Instead of having inserts I bought fit the shoes that I owned. And good feed store. Because of the differences in the size and the rigidity and the malleability of the plastics, these have been actually the most useful, but not in the capacity that they were sold to me. Instead of using the ultra thick insoles that they sold me for roughly $60 a pop that I did not need, just taking out the insole in your shoe that has a removable insole, putting one of these in the heel and putting the insole back on was enough to make a lot of my shoes wearable in a way that didn't cause me pain and being able to only be on my feet for maybe 2.5, 3 hours. So that aspect of the purchase that I ended up making, that $2,000 investment, paid off, because these larger ones, they're not going to fit in every shoe I have. These are probably the ones with the most bounce. So size-wise, if you compare them, they're still, they're able to fit within the New Balance ones. Now compared to the ones from the Podiatrist, they're about the same. So, and again, the Podiatrist one, the actual support extends to the midfoot, which is the equivalent here. But as you can see, there's a lot more arch in these, so the support is more substantial. So they have a good product. It's not the most complexly made or impressive looking product, but for the functionality of getting arch support in your shoes that lack them to the point that you have pain from plantar fasciitis, this system is the most flexible. You probably only need one pair. You don't need 4. The only thing I got out of having this set where they sold me an extra pair I absolutely didn't need and weren't able to sell me the first pair that were incompatible with my gait, these big waffle suckers here, the strengtheners, couldn't do them. The benefit of getting this set was that meant that I could use one set in one pair of shoes, one set in another, and I had to always swap these. So I ended up with 3 functional pairs for that excessive price that they charged me, but that allowed me to rotate them out and customize them. Like the black pair is a little smaller than these. So for shoes where they're very narrow, like my shoe size range in terms of width goes from D to E to double E to quadruple E. And that is a large determinant in which one of these inserts I can use. These are only going to fit in quadruple E's if I'm lucky. These, they're good for E and double E. And same for most of them. The black ones and these ones can get into D's without distorting and deforming the shoe too much and causing much damage. So I want to say that these were the narrowest of the bunch. The ones that I can't use at all because they're that super hard, rigid plastic with the leather topper that you can't put an insole over, and with the imprints that tear up your shoes. Let's see, was that right? Yeah, they're just a little bit narrow, but you can't tell because they cup up more. So yeah, that's Good Foot Store versus New Balance versus BK Podiatry, aka going to your podiatrist and having them actually get some custom-made insoles. These have a shelf life. I got contacted by my podiatrist after a certain number of months saying, you're due to get a new pair, like teeth cleaning, but I haven't been wearing them. So they base it on the expected usage, like you would a car's mileage. Oh, you've had the car a year, you're due for an oil change because you should have driven at least 7,000 to 10,000 miles. But for somebody who's only driving 1,500 miles in that year, then no, you're not due for an oil change. It's the wear and tear that determines the durability of the product, not the time span. So your mileage may vary. But yeah, if you go into the Good Feet store and you tell them and they respond in kind that you only need one pair, will you sell me one pair? And will you let me put these in my shoes with the insoles and see how they are? And they're willing to do that, then it's probably worth spending the money. If the only way they're going to sell you their product is to sell you this set of 3, and based on their own literature, try and upsell you to get a 4th pair, you know, this is the literature that they have that is not an actual instruction, it's a suggestion. Bear in mind that 4th pair, do you see the time? Do you see that of the 4 pairs that they sold me for a minimum of $410 a piece, that 2 of the pair you didn't wear even a 1/6 of the day? 15 minutes to 45 minutes, something that you paid $400 for, 1 hour to 2 hours. So yeah, this is egregious. This is Better Business Bureau worthy. And as a customer, unfortunately, I was in such a bad way that I was willing to just do what I needed to do to get back on my feet, literally, and to be functional again. So I kicked the can on making an issue of it and going back, because life was life, and then you got to do what you got to do to get by. Eventually, I got to that podiatrist appointment that I was not able to make it to, that had me at the store trying to find a solution, and that's when he sent me to the New Balance store. In the end, it was after doing the New Balance deal that I talked to a coworker who was having the same issues or had them in the past, and mentioned that our common podiatrist could actually trim these, that I got the best solution, which would have been the first solution, had I only known that I could have petitioned them to actually customize these further so that they would be more functional for me. Because my lack of that knowledge resulted in me not being able to use these as they were provided and seeking all these other options. So ask questions. Take your time. Be vigilant in advocating for your needs, not their sales pitch. They're going to try and sell you their product. They're not trying to solve your problem. Be focused on your problem and its solution, and do it in the capacity that works with your means. Don't let them talk you into incurring a large debt so that they can get something to hit their sales quota.